guys, it's Gamer Ahmer here. So today we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at some light gun games for this original Nintendo system right here. So back in 1985, you guys may have played Duck Hunt with this original light gun zapper right here. Well, there are actually several other games that I highly recommend for the Nintendo. So let's go ahead and check them out. So first, like I mentioned, we have this Duck Hunt game for the original Nintendo. Now this one was actually released in 1985 during the release of the Nintendo system, and you had your choice of either one of these two colored zappers right here. We have the orange, and then we have this gray light gun. Now I actually remember having this orange one growing up, so this definitely brings back a lot of memories. And this game right here, there were actually 3 different options where you could play. So you can shoot one duck as it flies up into the air, and then you'll have that famous scene where you have the dog who grabs the duck and holds it up. And then you go on to the next one where another duck flies up. You have to shoot that and the dog grabs it as well. Or you can go ahead and play the second option where 2 ducks actually fly up and then the famous dog comes out holding both ducks if you shot them. Now that one added a little bit more of a challenge than just one duck at a time. And then the last option, you could go ahead and shoot some clay pigeons. Now that one I found a lot more difficult because they were a lot smaller than the ducks that flown away. And it was a little bit more challenging because they go a little bit further into the distance. So this game is a must-have for any Nintendo system. This was actually the second best-selling Nintendo game. So this one was definitely a lot of fun to play. And I went ahead and played over all of these games again just for this video. And it brought back tons of memories. This is one of those nostalgic games and I love it so much. And just hearing the iconic sounds that are in this game just really brought me back to when I played this as a kid. And then next up we have this Wild Gunman game. And this one is one of those fun games as well. So this one was actually released during the launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System. So this was actually released in 1985 as well. Now this one had a different spin on things. So an enemy, which would be this Wild Western guy, he would come out and walk across the screen, and in a split second his eyes would light up and it would say fire. So you would have to quickly shoot with your zapper and go ahead and shoot this enemy before he got you. Now the cool thing is that it actually tracked your time. So from the second that his eyes lit up and he said fire to the second that you shot him, you actually had to beat it within a certain amount of seconds. And this was a pretty fun game, and it really was a lot different every time because it depended on how much time you were allotted to shoot the enemy before he shot you, or just if you wanted to go ahead and improve your reflexes in shooting this enemy right here. And then, just like the same theme as Duck Hunt, there would be an option where you can shoot just one enemy at a time, or you would be able to shoot 2. So there would be 2 enemies walking on screen, and they both would either light up and say fire, or just one would, and you had to make that split decision on which one you would shoot. Or if you had to shoot both, you had to quickly fire the zapper at both enemies before the time ran out. And then a neat option, which was option 3, this was the saloon. So what you would end up doing is shooting as many enemies that would pop up in the saloon. So there'd be different little windows or different areas where these guys from the Wild West would pop up, and you would go ahead and have to quickly fire at each of them without missing any of them and without getting shot back at. So this one kind of picked up the pace during that third option where you could just keep shooting multiple guys from the Wild West. So this one was a lot of fun. And then on to this next game, we have Hogan's Alley. Now this one right here was a little bit different than these other games, just because these were members of a mob, or bad guys as you would call them. So these guys would pop up on screen and they would be holding guns, so you would have to go ahead and shoot them. So that's much different than the Wild Western and the Duck Hunt. And these things were pretty cool because they were actually cardboard cutouts with these characters on them. So they weren't very realistic, but it was pretty neat how these cardboard slides would come right out on screen, and then at the last second, 3 of them at a time would flip. So you would see different members of the mob, you would see an innocent older gentleman, you would see a female, you would see a police officer. So you would have to quickly decide which one was the bad guy, and you would have to shoot him before time ran out, and you would have to try and not shoot the innocent people that were presented. So this one was a little bit more challenging because in that split second, sometimes it's a little bit difficult due to the color scheme that they chose for some of these characters. It was a little bit difficult to select which one was the bad guy. So this game made it a little bit more challenging. And if you think about many light gun games today, some of them actually stuck with this theme of presenting a bad guy and some innocent civilians, which in multiple games today, you see that you have to shoot the bad guys and you get punished or lose a life for shooting the innocent civilians. So this game was pretty fun. It definitely brought back a lot of memories and definitely made me think of so many great games today. And then another cool option with this game right here, they also had a different level where you could go ahead and shoot cans. Now this part was pretty neat because the cans would just come across the screen. At the very left of the screen, you would actually have these ledges where you would have to keep shooting the can, and each time it would go up a little bit higher, and you would have to try and land it on a certain ledge on the opposite side of the screen. And depending on which ledge it landed on, you got that number of points. So this was actually pretty fun. It's a lot different than just shooting people and ducks. So this was pretty neat, and it was a little bit more challenging, and the more that you play it, it can be completely different every time. So that was pretty neat that they added that in this game. Now on to this next game. We have Gotcha the Sport. Now this game was actually released in 1987, and it was based on the 1985 film. So this game was a lot different than these other 3 that I just mentioned. This one, you actually use the controller here to scroll left and right, and it's pretty much a capture the flag style game, and you actually shoot with paintballs. So this was a pretty neat and interesting game right here. Now the graphics were by far a lot better than these last 3 games, and it was pretty neat. You would pretty much start on your team's side where you had a flag, and you had to work your way all the way across to the other screen where you had the enemy's flag. And while you would advance to the enemy's flag, you would actually have to shoot enemies as they presented themselves, or you could quickly move past some of those. Now, it was pretty interesting because you didn't have unlimited ammo or anything. You had to actually collect more ammo as you went along. So when you would see these little ammo boxes present themselves, you had to shoot them, and you could get more ammo. before the game. Now, when you made it to the enemy side, you would see their flag hanging up, and you would have to shoot at that flag so that now it would be in your possession, and you would have to work your way back across the screen where you had just went the first time. So these enemies would come back and present themselves, and you would have to keep shooting at them until you made it all the way back on your side. So this game was a lot of fun. It was actually pretty neat, and I really enjoyed it. Now, there were a couple different levels as well. So you had the woods, a warehouse, and snow-covered fields. It's a little bit more challenging than some of the other games, just because it was a bit more fast-paced. You had multiple enemies, and they would present themselves at you. They would try and shoot at you, and if you weren't fast enough, or if you ran out of ammo, you would end up getting shot or losing. And it was kind of like a race against time, because as you could go across the map to get their flag, they could also do the same thing, and you had to beat them before they beat you. Now on to this next game right here. We have Shooting Range. Now on screen, it even shows a couple of the different levels on here. So what you have to do here is actually shoot some of these targets. Now, instead of aiming directly at the target itself, there's actually this little white and red circular symbol. It kind of looks like a mint, and it rotates right next to that enemy. So that's where you actually have to aim. So you have multiple levels. You start out actually in a desert, and you have to shoot some of these cowboys, Indians, some birds, and it's just pretty neat because you also use the controller to scroll left and right to see a little bit more than just one screen, and the enemies will just fly right across the screen, or they'll walk right across the screen, so you'll have to go ahead and shoot them. And then I thought the next level was pretty neat. Just in time for Halloween, we had this haunted house. Now this one was pretty sweet because it had many different characters. It wasn't just a couple. So you had this haunted house, and you would scroll left and right. You would see this vampire that you would have to shoot, and it would often fly across the screen as a bat. And then you would see Frankenstein. You would see some sort of werewolf-looking creature. You would have some ghosts, and they were a couple different styles. So this level was pretty sweet. I really liked the graphics on it. It was really neat that it added this horror aspect to this game. And then there was also a third level where you would have to shoot these bottles that were all across different shelves as they would light up. So that one was a little bit different than the first two levels. It was called their bonus level. And then this last one, you were actually in space. So there were these pretty cool aliens that would come across the screen. Now they definitely looked pretty interesting, and I liked that level a lot. And it was a little bit more quick-paced than some of these other games that I've mentioned, just because these targets actually moved, and you would have to go ahead and aim correctly to shoot these. And then on to this last game right here, we have Barker Bill's Trick Shooting. Now this game was actually released in 1990, so this one was much later than these other games here. Now this one was pretty interesting. It showed a male and female character on here, kind of like that magician who has their assistant with them. And you went through various trick shooting style games. So the first one, they would let up a bunch of balloons, and the balloons would fly across the screen, and you would have to shoot those balloons and pop them. And that one was actually called the Balloon Saloon. Next you had this flying saucer, where both of these characters threw saucers up into the air, and you would have to shoot both of those. And if you missed one, they would come back down and crash, and you would not get credit for that. And then there was a level called Window Panes. So pretty much you would see several windows, so several squares, and you would see some that didn't actually have the window glass, and you would see these items falling down each of those windows, and you would have to shoot at those items. So this one was pretty interesting. And you had the fourth option that was called Fun Follies. And what you would have to do there was play through all three of these previous options all in one. So you could either practice on each of these by themselves, or you could go ahead and play them all together. So this one was pretty neat. So overall, I enjoyed a lot of these games here. I had so much fun playing these over again, and some of these I even played for the first time. So I was really excited about these games, and I love light gun games, so playing these on the original Nintendo definitely brought back some of that nostalgia that I had growing up. I highly recommend playing these games. And if you are going to play these games, unfortunately they have to be played on the original CRT TV. So you can't actually play these games on any of these modern day televisions like LED or LCD. You actually have to go out and get one of those big box TVs. Now I actually played and recorded all of these games on my Samsung GX TV. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Go ahead and check out my other videos and comment below on what you thought.